everybody, I'm Laura. I was born on January 1st, 2007, into an already crowded family of many. The exact number is unimportant at this time. In a few short months, I will celebrate my 8th birthday, but already I'm feeling twice my age. Since my conception, I've never left my home of Independence, Kentucky, but my days were numbered living in the quaint city of Independence. I'm about to begin an adventure, traveling clear across this country of ours to reside in another country far away from the only family I knew. The hardships that would haunt me during my travels were unknown to me in the beginning, but became clear to me after leaving the city of my conception, where I always felt safe and sound after hearing our local fire trucks speeding down the road with the sirens blazing to rescue someone or save a building in dire need of help. I didn't have a need for packing anything to take along with me on my adventure, but I did need to make sure my body was covered properly in case of rain during the week of September. Before the truck ride to my final destination, I stopped into our post office to say goodbye one last time. I've heard so many good things about our post office, where all of the letters and packages go to be processed and shuffled on their way towards their own destinations with fancy, fresh stamps placed on their upper right corner, and with a thud sound of the postage mark to the left of the stamps. It was declared this parcel had begun its travels from Independence, Kentucky, with the date of its departure clearly visible. What an exciting time this was for me, beginning my first adventure across the country. But first, I would need to travel back and travel to Richmond, Texas, before my actual adventure traveling to Canada begins. I was warned in a whisper by an elder that once I arrived in Richmond, Texas, I would be placed up for inspection to make certain I was the proper one to travel the great distance to Canada. Only the bravest souls were allowed to leave Richmond after they were granted permission to embark on this quest across the country. The layover in Richmond, I was told, could perhaps be a lengthy one, because this place had so much going on at any given time. So my journey begins all safely tucked inside of the truck with a destination of Richmond, Texas on my horizon. The engine of the truck sounded like a marching band to me as we pulled out of the parking space, heading for Tennessee on our way to Richmond, Texas. My imagination on a scale of 1 to 10 was without a doubt a 10. No matter what situation I found myself in, I always made the best of my circumstances. I mean, really, what else was I supposed to do at this point in time? My fate was not held within my own hands, so I'd better make the lemonade taste as sweet as possible. In the grand scheme of things, this trip I was on was going to be a magical ride, as long as I could keep a positive attitude. The driver stopped the truck just before we were out of the city limits of Independence and cut the engine off, which left me wondering if I'd fallen asleep and we'd arrived in Tennessee already. Plop went a paper bag of fruit and vegetables the driver threw into the truck just before he jumped back into his seat and reignited the engine, again with the sounds of a marching band announcing we were on our way again. The smell of the fruit and even the vegetables made me feel like eating everything in the paper bag before we were even up to speed limit on the highway. I overheard the driver talking over his radio, telling someone he'd stopped off at the local farmer's market before we left the city limits. My heart sank inside of me after accepting the fact I shall never live in Independence, Kentucky again. Even the food didn't have an aroma after we were on the highway. Oh no, I've gone and lost one of my senses. I can't smell anything. The highway sounded as if it were screaming at us while he sped down the interstate. The hot asphalt meeting the rubber tires made any horror movie sound like rainbows and lollipops. Why, oh why, couldn't my hearing be the sense that up and disappeared? But oh no, the interstate was screaming and squealing under the driver until the driver stopped for gas. After he jumped out of the cab, I wondered why he never once cleaned the passenger side windows or the front windshield. There were bug guts covering the glass and dust from the highway so thick you would need a paint scraper to clean all of that off. After a short time I fell asleep again, listening to the screaming of the highway underneath the truck's tires. Tap, 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 tap. Bzzz. Tap, 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 tap. I felt a tiny sensation tapping on my jacket, waking me from dreaming about back home in Kentucky. To add to the frustration to the day, the driver must have bought old bananas at the farmer's market, because we had fruit flies buzzing around my jacket inside of this hot truck. I tried to make the best out of my situation, just like the elder taught me to do. So I pretended the marching band was conducting the screaming highway and the fruit flies were the chorus. We arrived in Arkansas without needing to stop again for gas or visit one of the many vegetable stands along the way. I was beginning to think the driver of the truck was an anti-social type of fellow who ate nothing except for fruit and vegetables. I suppose he felt I would never become hungry, because not once did he offer to share any of his food with me during the time I spent in his truck. We crossed the Arkansas state line without the marching band trailing along with us. The driver had slowed down quite a bit, I think because he was growing tired and possibly afraid of falling asleep behind the wheel of his truck, for which I would be forever grateful to this strange man, no matter what his reasons were at the time. I wondered for a split second if I was missed back home in Kentucky, or did they just go on about their day without ever once having me in their thoughts? Our trek through Tennessee flew by like the speed of light, and it only took us a little over 6 hours, which was 388 miles, to arrive to the state line of Arkansas. I wished I'd been awake when we drove through Memphis, Tennessee, because I would have loved to see where Elvis Presley lived. Back home there were many who would talk about the singer who died much too young from a drug overdose. But for me the fascination was all about his music, wishing I too had a talent to cause folks to take notice of me. But I'm still very young, and I know there are many doors that will open up for me once I find out my purpose. I've seen books back home about Elvis Presley, who was born in Tupelo, Mississippi. I wondered if I wasn't brought up with so many others, I might have begun to make a name for myself. Perhaps even become a teacher. I certainly have the imagination to keep any student from getting bored, because my quest for knowledge started with my conception. But I suppose I must grow into who I shall become, and I'll just have to be thankful I'm here. The driver disappeared from the truck after parking the vehicle and jumping out, slamming the door as if I were not here on the passenger seat. I tried my best to see out of the passenger side window, but after driving through a bit of rain, it only made the window muddy in appearance. But I could sort of make out the shape of a tall building that would have been interesting if I could have seen it clearly. So my imagination will have to carry me through the time I must be in the truck alone, waiting for the driver to return so we can continue our adventure to Richmond, Texas. I've accepted the driver of the truck on my adventure has decided not to talk to me directly, but rather sit in the driver's seat comfortable while talking to himself for the entire trip to Richmond, Texas. To be completely honest, I can't blame him for this, because what does one say to an 8-year-old? He has to be at least over 100 years old himself, and I've enjoyed glancing his way to try and count the wrinkles all over his face. The static coming off his CB radio has drove me insane anyway. It's a blessing this man doesn't speak 2 words to me, because I'd be hard-pressed not to give him my thoughts concerning this fact. My elder taught me to be as positive as I could muster up when in the presence of elders, and this old fart driving the truck definitely fits this description. The trip from Arkansas to Richmond, Texas was 479-mile trek, and it was going to take us 8 hours to complete, mostly in the dark. This time spent bobbing in the truck felt endless, and I was so excited to reach Richmond to see what was in store for me there. I worried I would not measure up to their expectations and wind up feeling embarrassed once I was deemed unacceptable to travel to Canada. All of the others back home must be wondering by now how my trip is going. I wished I had some sort of way to make contact to tell them all about my adventures so far. But the elder back home has faith in me to complete this mission he has put me on, and I would be offering someone at my final destination a world of help with their own endeavors. Along the way, we passed a few colleges and universities when the driver decided to get off the interstate for some food or gas. I dearly wished I was old enough to attend one of these higher learning schools, but I will have to wait until it's time for me to experience a school where there are miles and miles of books all around. Our little library back home is all right, but it can't compare to the volume of books inside the colleges and universities. I've always had an issue with having patience waiting. When will I ever catch a break to discover more than I already know in my age? But so far I've enjoyed this adventure as we pulled into town after town, often stopping for gum, so the driver can sit in the driver's seat and crack the gum between his brown teeth. To be completely honest, this adventure is growing a tad weary for me, waiting for the first glimpse of the Welcome to Texas sign. Just when this adventure is drawing closer to Richmond, Texas, there was an accident on the Arkansas River Bridge, which was closed to the southbound traffic yesterday. The driver needed to find a different route to take or spend the night in a motel in Arkansas. We had no idea how long the traffic would be at a dead stop, so we got off the highway and took the scenic route instead. The road we were on ran parallel with the train tracks, and I could feel the rumblings of the trains coming closer. I've heard about riding the rails, and I knew of books in our library back home in Kentucky that contained many stories that would have fascinated me beyond belief. I wish I could have taken a ride on one of those trains. I could hear them pass by at a faster rate of speed than the driver of the truck. I glanced over at him when I heard the train passing us, and wondered why he appeared not to notice them at all. Was he so old, I wondered, that the sound of a train didn't bring back any childhood memories for him? Or was the driver of this truck just too crusty of a fellow? He didn't give a hoot. The caboose rang its bell when passing the truck I was in, but my jacket was too tight across. I couldn't even flap like a bird to wave hello. I plan on making the most of all of my experiences, because you just never know when I will be one day outdated in the view of others, just like this old buzzard sitting across from me. After traveling at a snail's pace, as twilight approaches, I snuggled into my jacket, remembering the nights back home when darkness surrounded the town. Calmness blanketed my home, and all hope of being picked out as the best was shrouded in the shadows of the evening. Tomorrow was always another day, my elders would constantly have to remind me. But as I've said before, I'm not good with waiting on my purpose to begin. The night passed by at an alarming rate, and I became even more nervous about arriving in Richmond, Texas. It was nearing the time to go on stage and be judged as worthy to continue onward. There it was, the city limit sign for Richmond, Texas, gleaming in the darkness from the driver's headlights. I had arrived at a very important stopping point of my adventure. There was no longer any reason to fret over being nervous, because I had arrived to the place of judgment. The driver threw his heavy jacket over me to protect me from the rain, which was coming down in sheets. The wind howled, announcing our arrival, and for a moment I became scared for the first time since my own conception. I was then placed in a dark room, after the driver took back his jacket, flinging it over his broad shoulders. The darkness which surrounded me was familiar to my senses, but the damp, mildewy smells reached me at an alarming pace. I calmed myself down with thoughts of a citywide power outage due to the downpouring of rain and gale-force winds. Yes, this must be the reason for it being so dark in this room, I told myself, not actually believing a word of it. Sometimes an overactive imagination can be a burden to carry. Most times my imagination has me riding the rails on a fast-moving locomotive heading for grand off places. I've always wanted to travel beyond where I was conceived, but this dark room is causing chills to travel up and down my spine. My thoughts move to creepy crawling things in the darkness of the room I'd been placed, and I could almost feel something crawling up my jacket. I needed to find a way to calm myself down before my imagination got the better of me, and I convinced myself there was actually a giant spider crawling up the front of my jacket. I could hear voices from time to time, but couldn't make out what the men were saying. It all sounded like mumbled words, not fit for the written word. The driver of the truck had a southern accent, but the men in this building sounded strange to me. Since I've never been to Texas before, I had no idea what their accents sounded like. I heard footsteps coming closer to the door where I was placed, and hoped they were coming to shed a bit of light into this room. I would have given anything for one of those flashlights I've seen the elders use, but the footsteps appeared to stop right at the door, without anyone opening it up to hopefully shed some light on what's next for me. The muted voices just outside the door of the dark room I was in appeared to have stopped for the night. I could still hear the voices coming from a far-off distance, and could actually pick up some of what the men were talking about. One of the men must have been the leader of the group, perhaps even their elder. He told his buddies all about his daughter's plans for the last 2 weeks in October. There was going to be a family fall festival beginning October 25th, with train rides and a nice pumpkin patch and lots of inflatables for the children to enjoy. While the other man described the all-aboard gala his wife was making him attend on the 18th of this month, he continued to tell his buddies there would be 2 mayors at this posh event as well. The leader I could hear say, "Oh la la, you better wear your best overalls for this one," as they all began laughing, all the while trying to outdo each other. At least listening to these men banter back and forth made the darkness of the room I was in not so bad. But I was beginning to wonder what my own elder back home in Kentucky was thinking when he sent me off on this adventure. When the darkness puts a veil over my hometown back in Kentucky, you're not afraid of what lurks in the shadows. But here in Richmond, Texas, the void of any light in the room I'm in is causing me to become very weary with my surroundings. I don't actually get very tired at my young age, but given the amount of unknown facts about my trip, I'm treading on thin ice here as far as my bravery goes. I could remember our elder telling us all about the casting of a white shadow, but not till now did I understand what he was trying to teach. I shall be forever brave from this moment on, and only cast white shadow wherever I may travel. The footsteps began once again, growing closer to the room I was in. All of a sudden the door creaked open slowly, along with the passing of a bright flashlight into the room. With the flaps of my jacket covering me tightly for safety, I hoped for the best. After the flashlight was extinguished, there was a mere glimmer of light coming from the ceiling of the hallway we passed on our way to another room, where some sort of business must take place. I remained brave during the moments I was taken out of the dark room, where my imagination ran rapid with large insects crawling all over me, perhaps laying eggs right inside of the warmest parts of my jacket. I was more than ready to head outside into the daylight, even if the men were saying it was going to be 91 degrees and humid today, because of the storm that blew into Richmond yesterday. The one man with a strange accent was telling one of his buddies to put me in line for transport, because I'd passed inspection. Oh my, I thought, I'm worthy of traveling onward to Canada. Oh, how proud the elders will be once the confirmation letter is mailed out to them with this great news. The huge truck was loaded and ready for departure. One of the men told the other man, waiting by the driver's side door, smoking a cigarette. "Hit the road, Jack," he told him with a snicker. This adventure continues forward with the destination of the Canadian border to clear customs, and then on to my final destination in Ontario. All of my fears disappeared once the truck hit the interstate on our way north. We would be traveling from Richmond, Texas, to Ontario, Canada, and this trip will take 1,830 miles. I am beginning to feel like a seasoned traveler on this second truck heading north at a faster rate of speed. We must not have much traffic to contend with, I thought, while settling in comfortably in the back of the truck. A bonus was the music selection was much better than the last driver's selections. "Here I come, Ontario," I mumbled. The trip north was going to be a speedy one, because I was in the hands of a professional driver. In my own humble opinion, that is. He knew just what routes to take, missing out on the backup of traffic, and he didn't continually talk to himself like the other man. The hours spent riding in his truck was much more comfortable as well. I was given another jacket to wear so the chill of the October season wouldn't affect me. The radio announcer often spoke of a light to heavy rain, so I was grateful for the extra protection and warmth. While listening along with the driver, the radio announcer also mentioned this time of year was the best to drink in the beauty of the changing season, from summer to the chill in the air that brings with it the amazing fall colors. I wish I could have had windows in the back of the truck, so I too could partake of its beauty. But I am thankful I'm on the road again, traveling north towards my final destination. The many miles of highways and rest stops for the drivers has truly been an adventure. But once I arrive in Ontario, I know my purpose will finally be revealed to me, and I just know it will be greater than I've ever envisioned. We must be in big city by now, because all I can hear is cars and truck horns blasting every second, and I'm glad I can't drive a vehicle. I would have wrecked the truck a long time ago if I'd driven this far. The signs were leading us closer and closer to the Canadian border. I overheard the driver talking on his CB radio. These were the times I dearly wished I was capable of flying, so I could actually see what is going on outside of this truck. I'd arrived at a crossroad, so to speak, between USA and Canada. One way would take me back home to Independence, Kentucky. Not that this was even an option for me if I wanted it. No, my destiny was to fulfill the intent of this adventure, and I planned, come high water, I would succeed with this quest. We crossed the Peace Bridge slowly, as I assumed the truck driver wanted to absorb the beauty of his surroundings. The elders told me back home I would be crossing into Canada via this bridge. I suppose I've been lucky since my conception to have elders who watched out for me, until it was my time to strike out on my own. Once across the bridge, I overheard the driver calling his boss again on his CB radio, telling them we have crossed the Peace Bridge, and we were heading towards Canadian customs. My excitement was overwhelming at this point in time, because my adventure was drawing closer to its finale. We waited in the long lines at the entrance to the customs booths, while the driver turned the knob of his radio to find a stronger signal, hoping to find his tunes that met his musical taste. I waited patiently for us to clear customs so we could continue on our way in Ontario, Canada. Once we cleared customs in no time flat, we were on our way driving through Ontario, which was 298 miles away and should take us just over 5 hours to arrive to my final destination. Given no accidents along the way, we both settled in for the 5-hour drive after we passed the congestion of traffic in Toronto. The driver found the perfect radio station, and we both enjoyed listening to the radio announcer telling us what the weather conditions were for our travels. The excitement continues to build on the drive down Highway 11 North. The small towns in between Toronto and my final destination were hidden from the view of most travelers. Only a sign posted on the side of the highway telling you where you can get off. the interstate to visit some of them. I personally would have loved to take the side roads across Ontario, but it's taken over a month from the time I was picked up for this adventure, and possibly the person waiting for me at my final destination is getting nervous about my arrival. So I must stay true to this adventure and be happy to arrive in this new place where I will be loved and cherished. The elders back home in Kentucky told me all about the airport located there. It can welcome the biggest of airplanes to its runway. I sure hope I get to see this one day, after of course I've settled in for the long winter I hear they have. But before I can make any plans about touring this new city, I must settle into my new home and meet the person who will cherish my arrival. The driver turns off Highway 11 with a sharp left turn of his wheel, and I can feel it will be merely minutes until I meet my new family. I shall finally belong to someone, and I will be on yet another quest. The driver stopped the truck alongside of the driveway, carefully taking me along with him to the front door of the house. He rings the doorbell with his right hand, while holding me in his left. I can hear a low noise of a dog barking from behind the door, and worry if we will be eaten up promptly after they open it to us. To my surprise, there standing in the doorway was a lovely young lady with a smile across her face. She beamed with excitement upon her first glance of me. I wanted so much to yell out, "I've arrived!" But instead I remained poised and ready to introduce myself to her. "Hello, my name is Observation, the key to responsive teaching," I said to her. "You see, I'm already going to be a teacher, and this lady is going to be my student. She enrolled at the local college in this city, and I will supply the needed information she will need for her studies. I've finally found my home and my purpose. I look forward to my new surroundings, and I'm excited to hopefully see some of the beautiful sights of the city, following along with my new owner, of course." The end. Or is this just the beginning?